These are the notes here for 5, 4. So it's going to be multiplying and dividing rational expressions. The thing we still really need to know is how to factor. Okay, you're always going to factor first. Just like with the graphing, in order to identify the wholes and the asymptotes, we have to factor. So you really need to know how to factor. On top, x squared minus 25, that's the difference of two squares. So that's x plus 5, x minus 5. On bottom, what multiplies to negative 10? That means my signs have to be opposite. And it adds to negative 3. 5 minus 2 is 3, but I need it to be negative 3, so I have to put the 5 with the minus and the 2 with the plus. That is the first step. Okay? And then for the, quote, new stuff, it's cancel. We did this already in the other chapter where we had to find the wholes because we said, oh, once you factor, if it cancels, it's a whole. If it doesn't cancel, it's a vertical asymptote. So you technically have already done this simplifying. Just now, you're done once you have it simplified. You don't have to say anymore. Okay? Number 2 looks a little bit different. We haven't done any like that, but this is just multiplying fractions. So across the top, you have 5 times 2 is 10, times 3 is 30. I only have a y to the 4th on top, so I just have y to the 4th. On bottom, I have 9 times 10 is 90, times 7 is 60, is 630, because 9 times 7 is 63, and then times 10. I have a y squared and a y to the 1st, so that's y cubed. Okay, so that part's new. But this, if you think way back to when we did rational functions, we said, okay, I know these zeros are going to cancel to make my life easier, right? And then 3 over 63, well, 63 divided by 3 is 21. So you have a 21 on bottom. Maybe you didn't know that in your calculator. You just did 30 divided by 630, got a decimal, hit a math fraction on it. It told you 1 over 21. Okay. Dividing exponents here, you subtract. So 4 minus 3, that means these all cancel, and you're only left with a y on top. So that one maybe is a little bit different, but that's multiplying. Okay, when you just have one fraction equal one fraction. This one looks hard because you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have to FOIL this or trifoil it, whatever. No, factor first. Go back to the directions up top that say always factor first. Okay, so to factor this, what multiplies to 6 and adds to 5? Well, if it's a plus 6, they have to both be plus. My options are 6 and 1, which adds to 7, or 3 and 2, which sure adds to 5. Okay, I'm going to go right across to the next one and factor this. What multiplies to negative 4, that means my signs are opposite, and adds to 3. So it's 4 and 1, but I need my 4 to be positive and my 1 to be negative so that it's a positive 3. Okay, this is why, again, it's so important you know how to factor. On bottom, what multiplies to negative 20? That tells me my signs are opposite. It has to add to negative 1. So 5 and 4, negative 5, positive 4. Okay, the next set, what multiplies to negative 2 and adds to positive 1, that tells me my signs are opposite. 2 has to be bigger, and 1. So now that you have it all factored, which isn't new, we have done factoring since the beginning of the year. Now it's the, quote, new part, right, that says, hey, simplify. So I see an x plus 4 on top, and on bottom, it cancels. X minus 1 on top, and on bottom, it cancels. X plus 2 on top, and on bottom, it cancels. So what are you left with? X plus 3 on top, x minus 5 on bottom. Okay, so don't overthink it. Factor first and then just cancel. And number 2, when things don't factor, then do say, okay, I just have to multiply through and then cancel. Okay, so this one's dividing now. So yes, we're still going to factor. But this time, whenever you divide by a fraction, just in general, if I were dividing something by 1/2, that's still the same as multiplying by 2. So you're multiplying by the reciprocal, just in general, right? So I'm going to follow my same rules that say factor first. The x squared minus 9 becomes x minus 3, x plus 3. The bottom factor here, I can take an x out, and then I'm left with x plus 1, okay? Division, so the key is keep, change, flip. If this is division, you're going to keep the first fraction the same. So the x squared minus 9 was on top, x squared plus x is on bottom. I'm going to change it to multiplication. So this means now I'm just going to move the x minus 3 on bottom and the x squared minus 1 on top, which factors to x minus 1, x plus 1. So in one step. If it's multiplication, remember, you just write it as one big fraction. All right, so that's how I start. Keep, change, flip. Now this is just what we did above. Do you see an x term by itself on top? No. X plus 1 on top? Yes. X minus 3 on top? Yes. So what am I left with? X plus 3, x minus 1 on top, x on bottom. And then you're done. Don't bother multiplying it back out or anything like that. Okay, number 5 looks tricky, but it's just, this is the one you're keeping, this is the one you're flipping, and you're going to change multiplication to division. So let's just treat it the same way and say I'm going to factor x squared minus 1. That's x plus 1, x minus 1. Right? The denominator here, what multiplies to 2 and adds to 3, is going to be x plus 1, x plus 2. All right? The bottom here, the x plus 2 moves to the top, and then this x squared minus 2x plus 1 moves to the bottom, and it factors to x minus 1, x minus 1. So I went kind of fast there. If at any point you need to stop, rewind, or stop and pause, do so. All right, but I'm going to move on. Now it's for the canceling part. If you see x plus 1 on bottom and top, it cancels. X plus 2 is on bottom and on top, it cancels. X minus 1 is on bottom and on top, it cancels. I've already canceled out that x minus 1 on top, and I still have 1 remaining on bottom. So you just have a 1 on top as a placeholder, and you have x minus 1 on bottom. Okay? This next page here is just a bunch of practice. So maybe I'll go through and just do like the, I don't know, a couple here, like 1, 4, 6, 7, and then you can kind of do some practice from there. Okay? So step 1 is to factor. So in number 1, what does that factor to? X plus 4, x plus 2. On bottom, x plus 4, x minus 3. X plus 4 is canceled, so I'm just left with x plus 2 on top, x minus 3 on bottom. Okay? I am going a little bit quicker, just so at any point if you need to stop, do so. All right, number 4 is a little bit different because that is the one where you just multiply across the top, right? So on top, these are just 1, so I have 15. X cubed, x12 is x15. On bottom, 5 and 9 is 45. And then x to the 4th. Okay? These 15 and 45 reduces to 3, right? Because you can take a 3 out. So I'm going to have a 3 on bottom. I have x4 on bottom and 15 on top. So 15 minus 4 is 11. So I'm left with x11 on top. So if you can't factor, then you're going to do the type where you just multiply across the top. All right. Number 6 looks tricky. So that's why I wanted to move around here. Because you have this 6 out in front. Take a 6 out first. And then we'll go ahead and factor. So that's x squared plus 3x minus 18. Okay, then I'll go ahead and factor and say, okay, so I have a 6. What multiplies to negative 18 and adds to 3? That's going to be plus 6 minus 3. On bottom, what multiplies to negative 12 and adds to 4? X plus 6, x minus 2. You don't have to flip because it's multiplication here. So I still just have x plus 4 on top. 10x minus 30, all I can do is take out a 10, and I'm left with x minus 3. So sometimes that's the hardest part, is the factoring. If we've always struggled with factoring, that might be the hardest part. All right, so now I'm going to cancel, though. X plus 6 on bottom, x plus 6 on top. X minus 3 on top, x minus 3 on bottom. So I still have a 6 on top and a 10 on bottom. Just think in general, like in number 4, when we had 15 over 45, I said, I can divide them both by 15. So same idea here, 6 divided by 10, they both reduce by 2. So this would become a 5, this would become a 3. If you're not sure, just type in your calculator 6 divided by 10 and then hit a math fraction on it. You should get it. So I have a 3 on top and I have an x plus 4 on top. I have a 5 on bottom and an x minus 2 on bottom. And you can just stop there. Don't worry about trying to do multiply it out or anything like that. Nothing else reduces. We already did all of that work. Okay. I'm going to move on to my next page here. So we can do some division. So the only difference now is this is division. So this is just going to say, hey, don't forget to flip that second fraction when I turn it into multiplication. So you factor the top here, x plus 5, x minus 1. You have an 18 on bottom. You change to multiplication, which just means I'm going to move the 6 up top. I'm going to put it in parentheses. It doesn't need to be, but I just am. And then the x squared minus x moves to the bottom. I can take out an x. I'm left with x minus 1. So now you say, well, what cancels? I see I have an x minus 1 on top and on bottom. And then the 6 and the 18 divide, right? So the only thing I'm left with on top now is x plus 5. On bottom, looks like I just have an x, and a 3. So then you're done. Okay? Number 10 looks tricky, but don't overthink it. Keep this top fraction, flip the second, turn it into multiplication. So if I keep the top, you have to say what multiplies to, the bottom was already factored, so I put that. But what multiplies to negative 6 and adds to 1? So it's got to be a positive and a negative. If it was negative 6 and 1, that would be 5 or negative 5, which is not what I want. I want positive 1, so I need positive 3, negative 2. Okay, then I need to flip the bottom. So first thing I notice is I can take a 3 out. When I move the 3x plus 15 to the top, I'm going to say, okay, I can take out a 3, and then I'm left with x plus 5. When I move the 3x squared minus 12 to the bottom, I'm going to take out a 3, and then I'm left with, let me just do this up here for you, because when I take out a 3, I'm left with x squared minus 2, which simplifies again, or factors again, to x minus 2, x plus 2. Okay, so that's a lot of factoring all in the problem. But for the new part here, it was the keep, change, flip, and then, hey, whatever you see on top that you also see on bottom, cancel out. So what am I left with on top? X plus 3. What am I left with on bottom? X plus 2. Okay, like I said, for some people, the hardest part of this is going to just be the factoring part. All right, since division tends to trip us up, I will do this division as well. You have x to the 4th on top, and then on bottom, what multiplies to 54 and adds to 15. What's that, 9 and 6? Because that's 54 adds to 15. Okay, and then since this is division, this says, hey, make sure to move the x squared to the bottom and the x plus 9 to the top. Everything was already factored for me in that one. There was nothing more you could do. So now cancel. I see an x plus 9 on top and on bottom. X to the 4th on top, x squared on bottom. So that means I have to do the 4 minus 2. So that's the part where people tend to get tripped up. You don't think to cancel them. You do cancel them, right? So I have x squared on top, and the only thing left on bottom now is x plus 6. Okay, and then just move on to the last one here. What multiplies to 6 and adds to 5 is going to be x plus 2, x plus 3. And then on bottom, what multiplies to negative 3 and adds to 2, x plus 3, x minus 1. Because it's division here, it says, hey, flip. So the 10 is going to move to the top and put it in parentheses or not. Doesn't really matter, but if you do, sometimes it's a little easier. And then 10x plus 40 is going to move to the bottom but you want to take a 10 out. So then you're just left with 10, and then in parentheses, x plus 4. Okay, so the 10 and the 10 cancel. X plus 3 cancels. So I'm left with on top, x plus 2. On bottom, x minus 1, x plus 4. These problems have enough work. Don't worry about multiplying it out. If you do, fine. But if you multiply it out and get it wrong, you're just going to end up hurting yourself. Okay, so that is that. Practice 5, 4, B. All right.